The moment he called me garbage, something inside me didn't break. It sharpened. I can still hear the way his voice carried across that polished dining room, slow and deliberate, like he had rehearsed it in his head for days. The kind of sentence meant to humiliate, to reduce, to remind everyone exactly where they thought you belonged. My hands were steady on the table, but beneath the linen, my fingers pressed so hard into my palms that I could feel the sting long after the night was over. Every conversation in the room died instantly, replaced by a suffocating silence that wrapped itself around me like a trap. There were more than 20 people at that table, all dressed in tailored perfection, sipping wine that probably cost more than I used to earn in a month, and every single one of them turned to look at me, not with shock, not even with sympathy, mostly curiosity, like they were watching a test unfold, wondering if I would dare to speak back to a man like him. His name was William Harrington, a man who had built his reputation on legacy, control, and the quiet belief that money made him untouchable. To him, I was an outsider who had somehow slipped past the gates. I folded my napkin slowly, placing it beside my untouched plate as if this were just another dinner. I was politely excusing myself from. My voice when I finally spoke surprised even me. It was calm, steady, almost gentle. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Harrington. And thank you for finally saying what you really think." I stood up then, and feeling every pair follow me as I introduced myself properly. Not as someone's girlfriend, not as someone out of place, but as who I actually was. My name is Safiya Cross. I am 32 years old, and I built everything I have from nothing. What I didn't say in that moment was that he had just made the most expensive mistake of his life. Quinn reached for my hand under the table, his grip tight, almost desperate. I squeezed his fingers gently before letting go. He looked at me like he was trying to fix something that had already shattered. "Please don't," he whispered. I gave him a small smile. The kind you give someone when you already know what comes next. "It's okay. Your father is right. I should know my place." The satisfaction on William's face was immediate. It was subtle but unmistakable. The look of a man who believed he had just put someone back where they belonged. If only he understood what he had actually done. I walked out of that house with my head high, past walls decorated with art that probably cost millions, past staff who suddenly found the floor very interesting, past the kind of wealth that tried too hard to prove itself. The air outside felt different, cooler, cleaner, like I could finally breathe again. Quinn followed me out, catching up just as I reached my car. He looked completely undone, his composure gone, his voice shaking. "I am so sorry. I didn't know he would do that." I believed him. Quinn wasn't his father. He never had been. That was part of what made everything so complicated. I stepped closer, wrapping my arms around him briefly, both of us for a moment. "This is not your fault," I said quietly. I could feel him tense, like he was about to promise something. Probably that he would fix it. That he would make his father apologize. That everything would somehow go back to normal. But I stopped him before he could. No more apologizing for him. No more pretending he didn't mean it. He said exactly what he has been thinking all along. Quinn's expression shifted then, something heavier settling in his eyes. "Please don't let this ruin us." I placed a soft kiss on his forehead, holding it there just a second longer than necessary. If something is real, it doesn't break this easily. I got into my car after that, not looking back as I pulled away. In the rearview mirror, the Harrington estate looked like a postcard version of success. Perfect, distant, and completely hollow. My phone started ringing before I even reached the main road. I ignored it. I already knew who it would be. His mother trying to smooth things over. His sister trying to pretend it wasn't as bad as it looked. But I wasn't interested in comfort. I was interested in clarity, and I had decisions to make. By the time I reached the highway, I had already made the first one. I called Danielle. She answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the hour. She had been with me long enough to recognize the tone in my silence before I even spoke. "Is everything all right?" "No, but it will be." There was a brief pause before I said the words that would shift everything. "Cancel the Harrington deal." The silence on the other end stretched longer this time. "Mom, we are scheduled to finalize on Monday. Everything is ready. I know, cancel it." There was hesitation in her voice, not from doubting me, but from understanding the scale of what I was saying. This is a $2 billion merger. I leaned back in my seat, eyes fixed on the road ahead. And it is no longer happening. When I explained what had happened at dinner, her reaction was immediate, sharp, and fully aligned with mine. "I will have legal draft the termination notice tonight. Good, and send it immediately." As I ended the call, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not even revenge. Control. Because what William Harrington did know was that the woman he had just dismissed wasn't just some outsider trying to climb into his world. I owned. The future his company desperately needed, Cross Technologies, was mine. Every patent, every strategic acquisition, every quiet move made over the last decade had been leading to this exact position. I had built it carefully, intentionally, and mostly out of sight. I never needed recognition, I needed leverage, and now I had it. The next morning, my phone was flooded with missed calls, including several from William himself. That alone told me everything I needed to know. He had already figured it out. By the time I reached my office, Danielle informed me that he was downstairs, waiting, demanding to see me. I let him wait, not because I was being cruel, but because I wanted him to understand something very clearly. Access was no longer his to command. When I finally walked into the conference room, he looked different, smaller somehow. The confidence from the night before had been replaced with urgency. He stood up immediately. "Thank you for seeing me." I didn't offer my hand. I didn't smile. "You have 5 minutes." He apologized. The words came out stiff, forced, like they tasted bitter on his tongue. But I didn't accept them, because this was never about the apology. This was about consequence. When he asked what I wanted, I gave him the simplest answer possible. Respect. Not the kind that is spoken when it is convenient, but the kind that exists even when no one is watching. And when he tried to argue that business should remain separate from personal matters, I stopped him cold. "You made it personal the moment you decided I was beneath you." That was the moment everything changed. I told him the merger was over, not because I was emotional, not because I was impulsive, but because I had seen exactly who he was, and I had no interest in building anything with someone like that. The look on his face when he realized I wasn't bluffing was something I will never forget. It wasn't anger, it was fear, because for the first time, he understood that he wasn't in control anymore. When I walked out of that room, I didn't feel victorious. I felt certain. Later that day, Quinn came to see me. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. But there was something different in his expression, something clearer. He told me he had listened to everything, that he had spent his whole life avoiding conflict, especially with his father, that he had benefited from things he never questioned, and that he was done with that version of himself. I believed him, because change doesn't sound dramatic when it is real. It sounds quiet, steady, like truth. When he told me he wanted to build something on his own, without relying on his family's name, I didn't see weakness. I saw courage, and for the first time since that dinner, I smiled without restraint. The following days unfolded exactly as I expected. The board at Harrington Industries panicked. Investors grew nervous. Competitors started circling. And eventually, they made the only decision that could save them. They removed William. By the end of the week, the company had new leadership. By the beginning of the next, negotiations resumed. But this time, the terms were different, because now they were dealing with me on equal ground. Quinn joined the company shortly after, not because I handed him anything, but because he earned it. And watching him grow into his own identity, separate from his father's shadow, was something I respected more than any title. As for William, he disappeared from the spotlight almost entirely. I heard he tried to rebuild something on his own, but without the control he once had, things didn't go the way he expected. We never spoke again. And honestly, we didn't need to, because some lessons don't require a conversation. They require consequences. 6 months later, Quinn and I stood together on a quiet beach, far away from the noise, from the expectations, from everything that had once defined his world. When he asked me to marry him, there were no witnesses, no audience, no pressure, just two people who had chosen each other without conditions. And as I looked at him, I realized something that mattered more than anything. I had gained or lost along the way. Respect is not inherited. It is not bought. It is not demanded. It is earned. And anyone who refuses to give it when it is deserved eventually learns the same truth William Harrington did. If you treat people like they are nothing, don't be surprised when they become the reason you lose everything.